I'm going to call the meeting of the Norfolk Advisory Committee meeting to order for the March 19th meeting. First order is to take a roll call attendance. Thais Hickman.
Present.
Jonathan Hurwitz. Joyce Terrio. There. Ann Fitzgerald. Here. Melissa Sear.
Here.
Kevin Calcutt. Here. David Lutz is here. We are accounted for. Michael is not able to attend. Tonight is our schools night. We will hear from both of the school systems, and we also have to vote on this. I will take for the request the KP school school superintendent and member of the board out of Jim Lehan right now. There are the folding chair over there. Yeah, you guys want to move? If you want to sit on the same side.
You want some right here? Sure. Yeah.
Gentlemen, if you could introduce yourselves. Proceed. Would you like us to run your slideshow?
It's okay if you want to look at numbers in more detail, but I'll just go briefly, and then I did bring hard copies, so I'll pass those out.
Thank
To that.
We can stick with the hard copies.
So thanks for having us. My name is Rich Rollet. This is my second year as the superintendent of King Philip Regional School District. With me tonight is Jim Lehan, King Philip School Committee Chair. The Director of Finance and Operations, Mr. Azer, couldn't be here this evening. Jim's also on the King Philip Finance Subcommittee for our school committee subcommittee. So he's very familiar with the budget. And if you don't, oh, thank you. Okay, great. So if you don't mind, I'll just quickly go through. I have a 7-page budget narrative. You can read through it later. I did send it electronically. Yep. And then the slides, which Mr. Azer created, go over the numbers in more detail. But if I could just stick to the narrative and then refer to the one of the final pages of the slides, which has the Norfolk County assessment essentially from KP. So I just want to share that we do follow a budget calendar. Our proposal maintains high level of services for our students, plus attains goals in restoring some positions that needed to be cut last year. If you look at the bottom of page 1, it just says we continue to strive to increase innovative learning experiences for our students, work diligently with our learners to help them develop the knowledge, skills, and competencies necessary to be successful in college and career in their lives, and offer high quality educational courses, effective programs, and top-notch extracurriculars. If you go to page 2, this just at the top talks about Chapter 70 funding. We are receiving $8.33 million after $7.94 million last year. That's a $290,000 increase, which of course, as you know, is always subject to change. The middle of the second page just talks about how there is a statewide 6% increase to education. However, King Philip, as well as Rentham, Plainville, and Norfolk Elementary are one of 232 hold harmless districts. So these we're part of these 232 districts, which just see about 37 million of the 420 million increase to state education, and the rest goes towards primarily gateway cities, typically more urban. At the bottom of page 2, it talks about how our overall financial picture. As you may remember from last year, we had significant special education out of district tuition cost increases. We had to cut about 20 positions last year. This year, we've seen a reduction in out of district placements and tuitions as a result. Also saved $150,000 because we are joining as of July 1st the Tech cooperative. So besides being members of BICO, Bi-County, we are also will be members July 1st as part of the education cooperative, which some of our students go to, and that we get a lower member rate, and either Mr. Lehan or I can serve on the board. So that's a positive, which will continue. So if we were to submit a needs-based budget, we would have had a 6.7% increase. But we did, we're coming in at an overall increase from our budget last year of a 4.13% increase, and that's 1,657,849. So I'm on the page 3 now, towards the middle. We are restoring 7 positions. 5 of them are teacher assistants, which cost-wise is about half of a teacher in terms of about $33,000 a year. And then we're restoring a special education teacher at the middle school and a district speech language pathologist. These positions all go towards working with students, or will go towards working with students with IEPs. So just as a reminder, we cut 20 positions last year. We had a 4.38% increase last year. This year we're coming in at 4.13, and we're able to restore 7 of those positions. The bottom of page 3 talks about we do offer. We're trying to be creative, and we started a new specialized therapeutic program at our high school this year to try to keep students in district and save money. And that wasn't by adding positions. We reallocated some staff within our special education department. And this new program has been successful this year. We want to similarly, the special education teacher position at the middle school is to create a specialized program at our middle school to keep kids in district. So we continue to strive to reduce out of district tuitions, but also we think it's in the best interest of students to be in their home district. The one position which we did add this year and we are keeping, but is not in our budget, is an EL teacher, EL/ML teacher, English learner, multilingual teacher. As you know, with the Norfolk shelter, we do currently have 24 students, newcomer students, almost all require EL services. DESE did pay for that position, or most of it, for this year only. And that salary is $95,000. And that person we're going to keep next year because we need to see, some students may stay in district, and we are counting on the state funding, the $104 a day per student, which ended as of January 1st. But I received news that is retroactively going to be paid and funded from January 1st to the end of the school year, and those monies can be carried over to next year. So we will use those monies to pay for that teacher position next year, and then we'll see at this time next year if we need to add that EL teacher position into our budget for FY27, or if that position would go away. So can
I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Would it is it someone who would have the ability to teach regular language classes? Or?
It's a good question. It's a high salary position, very expert EL teacher.
So they're multilingual kind of. Yeah.
If we could keep that teacher, if there's other certifications, I would check and see at that time next year. But that's a good question. Now on to page 5. There's the positions. Teacher assistants, 3 at the high school, 1 at the middle school, 1 for our 18 to 22-year-old, links, special education program, and 2 teachers. There is $131,193 being restored to instructional supplies and service lines that was cut last year, as we didn't just cut 20 positions. We had to cut about $2 million last year, so we also cut a number of our lines, and there's $146,000 being added to our facilities line. So if you look on page 5, the bulleted list, that makes up $146,000 in facilities upgrades. And then on to page 6, the bulleted line item increases. Page 6 talks about athletics. We were going to have to raise athletic fees for families, but we fortunately didn't have to do that as we have a reduction in healthcare costs. So we went out to bid, and that was reduced from 8.5 to 5% for next year. So as a result, we're putting, we are increasing $227,000 to our athletics operating line, because previously the athletics revolving account, since COVID, they've been using that as that had extra monies in there, as there was savings in athletics costs during COVID. that is now depleted, that athletics revolving account, and so we are now putting into our operating budget $227,000 more to keep our promise of a 70-30 split with families. So we pay 70% of costs for athletics, and the family, the athletic fee, the other 30% is funded by families. But the costs have gone up exponentially with transportation, coaching stipends, game and event officials, and athletic trainers over the past few years.
I want to ask a quick question about that. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that sports specific?
All sports.
But no, meaning is the 70-30 split sport specific?
We have a tiered list that ranges, I believe, anywhere from $200 to $600, depending on the sport. I think like hockey being the most expensive, and track and field, for example, might be least expensive. And those have remained the same, I think, for a good 10 years now, despite cost going up.
Thank you.
E&D, one change this year, the previous 7 or 8 years, the district has taken $400,000 and put it from E&D into the operating budget each year. Last year, we saw E&D drop from 1.3 million to 960,000 because we had a deficit. We can't continue that trend. This is our if you look on the top of page 7, I gave some reasons why we're just putting 300,000 from the E&D into offsetting our operating budget for FY26. We want to aim to build it back up closer to 3%. As I think you know, it can go as high as 5%. I think Tri-County, for example, theirs is at the max 5%. We also are anticipating hopefully just having 300,000 turn back monies at the end of the year to keep it at 960,000 to go back for next year, but it could be less. So our E&D could continue to go down for FY26. I also think it's a best budgeting practice to not build your operating budget on E&D every year. So over the next few years, that's something we'll try to address. And then lastly, besides at the bottom where I say thank you to all school committee members, residents, parents, town leaders from the tri-towns. We did just submit Monday statements of interest through accelerated repair program through MSBA, Massachusetts Building Authority. They are doing the accelerated repair program every 2 years now, and we just qualified where the roofs at both the high school and the middle school are 20 years old. So we can now put in for that. We don't think we'll get it right away, but we're in the queue. We hope to get in the queue for future years. And that's for roofs, boilers, and windows and energy efficiency. So we did put in for that with the school committee's support. And then I'll just finally skip and then happily answer any questions, slides. I'll just skip to, I think it's the last page, but it has the member town assessment or if you go back. So the sheet looks like this, and it's got attached PowerPoint to work in the computer. There you go. Yeah, it's got. Yep. Is it the last page? Thank you. All right, I thought I was different. That breaks down the assessments, and it says reduce 100K at the top because we had originally come in at 4.38% increase after meeting with the town administrators to see if we could get that down. We fortunately in that same week had a reduction in special education out of district tuitions. And so we were able to reduce it by 100,000. So it came in instead of 4.38 like last year at 4.13% overall increase. And that translates to Norfolk to be a 5.19% increase. You'll see at the bottom in that orange reddish color. And I'm happy to go over the slides in more detail if you have questions about things, but that's just a summary. And I don't know, Jim, if you wanted to contribute at all, but you happy to answer questions tonight. If you have questions and want to email me or call me as well. And the slides kind of take you through a lot of the numbers in past years.
Chair, I have a question.
Please.
Thank you for the presentation. It seems like everyone is at a deficit and you're finding savings. I think you've done a really good job here. So was there something specific? I know you just mentioned the special ed out of district placement that allowed you to be able to bring back 7 positions, which is excellent. And also come in under budget this year.
So after it went up astronomically last year, that was the biggest reduction. I think it was like $500,000 in out of district tuitions, which went down. Some of it is we're building programming, some of it is we're lucky as students move out, for example. But we did build, we built that high school and district program. We're looking to do that at the middle school next year as well. One other thing is we had originally budgeted healthcare as for our own municipality responsible for healthcare. We had originally budgeted that at I think 8.5%, because that's what they originally gave to us in January. And we went out to bid this year for the first time. They came down to 5% for healthcare. So that was, I think, about $200,000 is one much less than we anticipated. So those were some things went up, like athletics.
Yeah.
But that overall, that was the biggest difference. Also, you have to keep in mind, we cut 20 positions last year. So cutting those 20 positions,
You're still not.
they're not,
to-
they weren't in the budget this year. So
Yeah.
that would have made the increase a lot higher, healthcare down.
Thank you.
Ken,
2 questions. The first, I want to talk about that healthcare because I was pestered the town administrator on the municipal side about healthcare going out to bid. And I'm curious, how many employees do you have in the healthcare, your healthcare, roughly?
We have about between 300 and 350 employees, depending if you count, like food service, crossing guards.
But that are taking the benefit
Or that are taking, I have to get back to you on that. It's the majority. And then I could get a breakdown of who has the family plan and the individual plan.
No, that's not it. What, do you know what your experience was?
In terms of
The experience is what they call, it's what the insurance company calls
claims.
Not that the claims were, did your coverage bill say it's high?
I would have to check. It went down in terms of the claims. It also got to keep in mind our membership went down by about 20. So the past 2 years, it's just been at 5%, which I feel fortunate because I'm hearing it in the teens for
18.
We've been told ours might be a little bit better because it's just educational workers and not like police and fire who have higher risk physical safety jobs in terms of claims as well. We have a broker that we deal with.
Did you guys change brokers?
No.
Who's the broker?
It's Borislow, and Someone Insurance.
Yep.
And they last year when we had such a difficult budget year, we met with them to ask them to reduce it, and in good faith, they said they did last year, although the claims or the numbers didn't support it. This year, we went out to bid and it came down, and fortunately, it was with the same.
You didn't have to change.
No, because that would have had to have been like the bargains.
Yeah.
And that would have been an obstacle.
Kevin, can I ask a follow-up question, then we'll get to yours? Did their teaching assistants get offered full benefits, pensions? And
Yeah, all employees half-time or more
Okay,
get offered.
Right.
Benefits that full-time or at work 30 more hours.
Sorry,
Kevin,
can I ask someone to follow up?
on that, yeah, okay, yep.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe this is a question both to you, Dr. Gurley, and Justin as well. I understand KP's are own municipality, but is it allowable in the state for municipalities to join forces for these types of public contracts? Meaning, I would assume if Norfolk or whatever other towns wanted to band together, or buying power, negotiation power ought to increase with more people. Because I know we've struggled with a lack of ability to go out to bid with the kind of vertical relationship we have, and it's continued to increase. I mean, we ever thought, first, is it even a legal possibility for us to investigate, I sort of investigate, but is that on the table for the town and the school district to be one for these types of healthcare contracts?
I get one quickly, Kevin. I mean, best collaborative, best guess, best collaboratives that other communities that we collaborate on health insurance. I think for us, we've always had the philosophy, let's look at everything, just being transparent. Our claims have been pretty high the last few years. I really spoke with one of our fellow town ministers in Plainville because I know they're part of collaborative. We were talking about experiences, at one point we were over 130%. People don't want to collaborate with us too much when their claims are like that. Right? It's going to be a high cost. I think this year the claims have come down, and that's something that we want to expect.
And that same claim board administrator reached out us to last year to try to get us to join their consortium. So I think it's possible. However, it is complicated with collective bargaining as well. And it's a good thing we didn't join them because I think theirs went up a lot. I think there's a so
Okay, thank you.
So Rich, you talked about the way that you were able to get to a 4.13 overall budget increase. You cited in here about it being a blend of a level service and needs-based budget, also citing that a needs-based budget would have been around 6.7%. Can you talk to me about what was included in that gap between those two numbers?
sure. I think it's in one of the slides.
Yeah, apologies if I missed
But
it.
no, and it might not list all the specific positions, and it wasn't simply bringing back all the 20 positions that were cut last year. We did, we meet with the principals and the department leaders to determine what we do. See if I can find that slide.
It's on page 11, slide
Thank you.
22.
Yeah, it doesn't mention the specific position, but you're right. Thank you. Page 11 on the slide 22. It would have been 7 more positions for $443,000, 877. And we wanted to add 214,000 more in instructional equipment and supplies and 105,000 more in facilities upgrades. So those 7 positions and those others were not added. We could range from instruments for our high school band program for some of the equipment and supplies to online assessing of students, online programming for student support, the staffing requests. I think 5 out of the 7 was bringing back some of the things that were cut last year. For example, off the top of my head, a secretary, a special education teacher at the middle school, another special education teacher, a campus supervisor for our high school, besides our SRO to help with supervision and security. So those are examples of positions that we would if we had the full needs base, it would have been more at 6.7%, but we know that's not realistic.
Yep.
And also we had to prioritize. It was like last year we had a tiered cut list.
Right.
This year it was like a tiered, what can we
Scale back. Yes. One quick follow-up. You did mention the transportation reimbursement, which I know is the bane of everybody's existence every year about it not being fully funded. Obviously, still a lot of work to do to get to a final number. It's not just what the governor proposes. What was that number at in terms of a percentage, at least in the first blush?
That's a good question. That's another cost increase that we've had. Transportation, we do anticipate to like McKinney-Vento budgeted, I think, instead of like double that for next year, anticipating higher costs there. I think that it's actually a slide too, transportation. That was one of our cost increases. But
15, yeah, I see the transportation reimbursement slide, but it only went up to FY24 for historical.
you have a page or slide.
So that was slide 15, sorry, that was page 8.
Yeah, I think that slide was now, it's been underfunded for the past 10 years. Is it at 80% now? For a regional reimbursement for transportation, I think.
That seems to be the standard starting point.
Right, so I think, that you look at the numbers of what we're entitled to on page 8, slide 15 versus what we're getting for reimbursement. Although the gap is narrowed a little bit, it's still underfunded. So, but you might know better than I, but I have to get back a little bit more information. But I want to say transportation that they had also been offsetting it with the revolving account, and that's no longer able to happen.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, John. Yep.
Got a couple questions on the EL and L
Sure.
teacher position. First, I mean, it says in here, you verbalize this as well, but SE most of it, and it's primarily, I'm just wondering if you can break down what that means.
So Destiny for this year only with the addition of the shelter paid us $90,000, but the teacher salary is 93. Next year it'll be 95, but and then with benefits it's like $105,000. So we got
90% ish.
about 90% ish.
Okay.
And so by the time we get to there's 3 payments for the $104 a day per student. So pretty much half of our payment 2, which should be coming soon, and then our full payment 3, which will come over the summer, should be about that amount to pay for the teacher next year.
Okay, so that leads me to the
But it's
next.
not in this budget. Okay, yeah.
That leads me to my next question, which is the DESI grant, that, just to confirm, like you said, the DESI grant that's paying for this is one and the same as that per student reimbursement, that per diem.
Yes, yes.
So while you're projecting they're gonna pay 90%, is that actually difficult to predict because that student population is fluctuating?
Mhm.
You thought that on a full year of 40 students, we get 90,000, but if
Right.
half of them
It would,
are no longer enrolled, we'd still have, I mean, we'd have more liability as a school district for that. So that this isn't necessarily, even for the remainder of this school year, there's some uncertainty or variability. Is that correct?
yes, if
With
all of
the
the students
council.
move, if all of the students moved out now.
Yep.
We wouldn't get a third payment over the summer. The first payment was based on us having 17 students. We do have 24 now, so if anything, we do anticipate the majority of those students staying for the end of the school year. So I'm confident that money will be there, but the numbers of kids can certainly fluctuate.
Okay, and then thank you. Last question is carrying this now into the next school year. I don't want to assume too much, so I'll just ask, but I thought, is it the case that DESI funding is not yet committed for next year?
I think it was just recently committed retroactively from January 1 of this year till the end of the school year.
Right, but we're talking about the budget for this teacher for the next school year.
Right.
So $95,000 plus benefits. And we're projecting that this DESI money will come and then pay 90% of it with some variability. But I guess the question is that money from DESI for this next school year is not yet committed.
No, and we will plan as if it's not going to be there. That we will not get any money for the 2020 for FY27 or over the course.
So part of, just to restate that, part of the plan is this will be, what's the word I'm looking for? This will be part of just essentially fully funded from the school budget.
Correct.
If and when DESI money comes in, does that just go back to the EE fund, or, I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter, but that would be sound money.
It's like a grant. We will decide next year if we go back from 3 to 2 EL teachers or if we need to add it to our operating budget. I do not anticipate money from the state to pay for it for the 2026, 2027 school year or the 25-26 school year.
So, and it's mandated.
Oh, it's based on student need.
Yeah.
So if all of the students move out, then we could cut the position.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about something that I'm a nerd about because my colleague. You talked, your electricity costs have gone down by 48% 5 years.
Which slide are you on?
It's on slide 21. And then you're saving 4,000 per month on solar net metering credits. If you can't give me the answer now, that's fine. Is there a solar system that's on one of the schools that I'm not aware of?
No, although we looked into solar on the roofs.
Wait till you redo your roofs before you do it.
Yeah, no. or simultaneously, but no, Mr. Izzer, who's not here tonight, can speak more articulately about that than I, but there's a metering credit in place with, the electricity. We don't have, solar or
Right,
anything, but it's,
But is the reduction also based on that, or is it based on energy efficiency work that's occurred, or?
I couldn't tell you. We'd have to look.
I'd be interested in just
Okay.
follow up
I'll
later.
find out. All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Chair, I have another question.
Sure.
Can we talk a little bit about the hold harmless definition specific to our district and if there's something we can do, either additional grants and or try to move out of that category to make us eligible for more funding?
Yes, and I think there's people advocating, you know, for more funding. My understanding of it is that hold harmless means state funding does not go down. So even though our school district has seen a decrease in students over the past 10 years, as has most school districts, we wouldn't get less funding. So hold harmless means even if your student population goes down, you'll get at least the same amount of money you got the previous year. Plus the past number of years, they've been giving an extra $30 per student, or I think this year it was $75 per student. So that's my understanding of it. The Student Opportunity Act, this is going into year 5 of year 6, and that was put in place right before COVID to try to, I think, level the playing field so that districts that had historically been underfunded per pupil or students with higher needs weren't getting additional funding, but now they are. And I think those districts are seeing the majority of the state funding increase over the past 6 years, those gateway cities, for example. So there is a slide I have here that says the proportion of our budget has gone from about, I think, 25.6% to 22% funded by the state over the past 5 years. So that means locally, it's requiring more local contribution to fund our schools than state. So we need to continue to advocate for more state funding for education and moving forward, not just for districts that have been historically underfunded, but for all districts.
Right.
That's my understanding of it.
Thanks. Kevin's nodding, so.
Yeah, but nice job. Anyone else have any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. If there are a couple follow-up things, I'll try to follow up with an
And
email.
I'll try to follow up with the energy.
Right.
Question.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You.
And you're off to another meeting. Enjoy yourselves. Tell Jim to dress up next time. I'm teasing. Thanks, Rich.
Thank to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. We're now going to hear from the Norfolk Public Schools. Quite a contingent here.
Plain goes. Since there's. Yeah, and I come this guy, yeah, for their comments, we're super, we're showing, we're showing. You should know. We started business use to go, check the box for that district, right? I'm sorry, woman said he went on.
Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Yeah.
Introduce the team could introduce themselves and.
Marion Goodman, business consultant.
Peter Schwalman, school committee.
Lauren Vivas, school committee.
Thank you. Welcome. We're interested in hearing what you are going to present to us.
Sure. So I emailed everybody, so you should all have electronic version. I made a couple of copies saying I didn't have them, but I didn't make copies for them for everyone. So it will be projected on screen. So before I walk through the budget, As I'm sure you're hearing from department to department, it was a challenging budget year. I just want to set the stage before we get into the details about this year. If you remember, when we came and presented our budget request last year, we did, in order to balance our budget, have to use three sources of one-time funds. We had an increase in special education costs, transportation costs, and growing enrollment. So we used 125,000 from the special stabilization account, 108,000 from a revolving tuition account, which closed that account. And then additionally, the town received additional chapter 7 funds that were appropriated to the Norfolk Elementary School at fall town meeting that are not reflected in the base budget. And that was used to fund the additional first grade teacher that needed based on enrollment. So a level service budget for us for this year would have come in at 10.1%. When you use one-time funds, we start this year 300,000 behind. We were 300,000 short of balancing budget last year. Recognizing there's no way the town can fund 10.1% with the other department pulls, we've already, before presenting the budget that we're considering tonight, we've cut about close to $1 million out of our budget request. So I've gone through that. I won't go into detail the link to our public hearing so that if you want the full presentation, you can go back to that. But I'm just going to highlight a few key things. We've already talked about this numerous times about the growth in the schools. You can see we're up about 190 students over the last decade. Go on to the next area. Again, proportionally, the majority of the growth started at $8 a day, and then now as the larger kindergarten and first grade classes, second grade classes roll up, we're seeing that growth hit the Premium Kennedy School. So 123 new students in $8 a day. This is K-2 only. I think we talked about this last time. We don't include preschool. Preschool is capped by space. We only can accommodate 62 students in our preschool. We can't grow that.
I tried to get the nice one out.
We can only accommodate 62 students. Back in 2015, we had 60 students in our preschool. We didn't have any families waiting. If you ever been to Norfolk in January and you had a preschool student, you were welcome and to come into our school. Currently, we have 7 families on the waiting list. We can't serve those students. By law, if a student has a disability as of their 3rd birthday, they're brought into schools. And we have, under the legal requirements, we have to have integrated preschools. So we have a parallel number or comparable number of peers in those preschool programs. So we don't include that because it's misleading because the population is growing, but it's not captured because it's spaced out. Go on to the next. Obviously, you know the cost of growing enrollment from staffing, so I won't spend time on that. Up ahead. Changes to federal funding. So I know Rich talked a little bit about this. We are a minimum aid community. As far as chapter 70 goes, that's on the next slide. We do receive very little in title grants. We have Title I, Title IIA, Title IV funding, about 36,000 we expect next year. Those numbers have fluctuated. Last year, we actually lost Title IV altogether. They're based on the percentage of students you have that are low income. We were in warning status in 23-24 that we were going to miss all of the title grants. But because the shelter opened, we have an additional number of students that are eligible, are in the low income category. We project we will continue to have those funds next year. So they are incorporated in our budget. On the other side, we see what we received in federal grants, primarily special education. It's about 300,000.
Can I ask a quick question about the federal grants?
Yes, you
Are
have.
they entitlement grants for all intents and
They're
purposes?
entitlement grants,
They're
yes.
based on your population.
They're based on our population, yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the IDEA grants, which are being, which are under scrutiny right now?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on whether or not these funds will continue? Or are they,
That we're at this point, we're projecting that we are going to receive, that those grants will be level funded next year. And so those projections are based on, what we're receiving this year.
okay, thank you.
As Rich talked about, we are a minimum aid community. Chapter 78 funds about 22.8% of the overall Norfolk budget for next year. At the elementary schools, the remainder is local contribution. The preliminary estimate is $75 additional per pupil, in the governor's budget. Jump on. You can see, as Rich talked about, full harmless, so you are guaranteed we are guaranteed to receive at least what we received the year previous. So Title I funding has gone up. However, our enrollment has also gone up. And so if you look by per pupil, what we're receiving in Chapter 7, it's actually going down. But we're the overall aid is going up. Go ahead. So this is something, and I know people are working on advocacy around this, and I'll reflect this when we talk about the per pupil student expenditures, which I regularly share with you. So one of the things that has changed, there's a lot of advocacy around trying to correct the Chapter 70 formula. In the old formula, it was capped, it couldn't increase by more than 4.5% annually. That was the inflation cap. There were years during 2021, 2022, inflation far exceeded that, so Chapter 70 lagged behind. In the old formula, the gap used to be added into the next fiscal year to try to correct, but that was also changed and now it's not added in. So there's a lag in Chapter 70 funding in terms of keeping up with inflation. Additionally, the state of Massachusetts has a lot of competitive grants that have become available to help districts kind of offset those rising educational costs. However, those educational additional supplementary grants are targeted to communities that meet the following priorities. So districts that are in chronically underperforming status, districts that have at least one school identified as requiring assistance according to the state accountability system, so that's MCAS, districts in rural communities, or districts with a student population in which greater than 40% are designated as low income. So as a result, we do not meet those criteria. So while Chapter 70 for us is lagging behind inflation, all of the new competitive grants we're not eligible for them. They're being allocated to other districts. So you can see we applied for 5 grants that came out over the last few years to help us with curriculum adoption, social studies, after school and out of school time. An ELA curriculum grant, a grant around implementing a new dyslexia experience that's mandated by the state, and a high quality math grant. We were declined for all of those grant funding. The only 2 grants we've successfully procured, and we pursue every opportunity, we've developed regional consortium. So we reached out to KP, but we applied for a regional behavioral health grant as a 4-district community, and we're securing that fund. And also regionalized at the elementary level for a Title III grant for English to support English language acquisition and academic achievement.
John,
I'm sorry, but quick question on the grant side of MCAS, since I know this may still be an emerging topic, but since MCAS is no longer required for graduation, are you finding or anticipating parents trying to opt their kids out of taking MCAS, and in turn, is that going to affect our eligibility if we're not even able to report
It's a good question because they do part of the accountability rating is participation in MCAS. We have our first administration coming up for grades 3 through 6 ELA, which is at the end of the year. We have not received a large number of parents requesting to opt out. It potentially could become problematic long term. I think the MCAS, even though it's not a graduation requirement, it's still an annual state requirement. And it does give us important information and parents important information about how students are progressing. It just doesn't have that high accountability high school requirement.
Right.
But we haven't seen significant changes in participation.
No, I mean, yes, I'm aware it's more high school graduation, but I'm just worried about trickle down effect.
Right. No,
That, and then people saying if it's no longer required by the state, we're just gonna, for right or for wrong, right? Kids, parents don't believe in it. Kids are stressed by it, whatever it may be. So perhaps too early to tell, but I would be nervous that opt-outs will be increasing over time, and that could jeopardize.
yeah. What that would jeopardize would be our accountability rate from the
That's
state.
stressful.
But most of these competitive grants are not necessarily tied to, or they're tied to district and.
I can imagine maybe certain.
Quickly, there's a lot of detail on the MCAS scores provided in the public hearings, but we do share with you our overall scores across the state. There's been a decline in English language arts scores particularly post-COVID. You can see that we've experienced that certainly in Norfolk. We gave you the pre-pandemic scores in 2019, about 63% of third grade students were meeting and exceeding. You can see the scores going down. There was a dip after COVID, and now we're in the recovery phase. So I think all of our scores have recovered in grade 3. We're seeing students performing at pre-pandemic levels. Grade 4, the gap is closing. Grade 5 and 6 continue to be challenging. Again, we applied for funding for the new ELA program. We were applying that. We had to postpone it a year. Many other districts were able to access and leverage state funds to implement that faster. But if you go to the next slide, Erica.
I just had a question about that.
Yep.
So am I correct in reading this that your grade 3 kids in 2022 are doing worse than grade 5 in 2024? So they've lost ground actually from 2020, 60% in the past, then 53, then 50.
Yeah.
So they're actually getting worse post-COVID.
Well, it's a little bit challenging because you're looking at totally different tests and standards, and as a state, even pre-COVID.
But that
it's a decline.
That cohort.
Yes.
The kids that are still in the 40s.
No. So in grade 3, right?
Yeah.
In 2022.
Yeah, 2022, and then that's
60% of grade 3. Yeah, then they're in grade 4 and then only 53% are passing and then only 50% are passing.
Yeah.
So that's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Well, not necessarily. Some of these kids have disrupted learning, and so foundational skills are being reviewed and retaught in the successor grade, and so.
So they're
have
getting farther
a
behind.
impact. But also, again, as I said, pre-COVID, grade 4 and 5, we see a decline in MCAS scores. The tests are more rigorous, there's a lot more advanced standards. So that is not atypical. Again, if you want to add.
The
anything to
MCAS
that.
test also was changed in 2023. They actually now have a measure writing, and they added a lot of more I think rigorous components that they haven't measured. So even though we show 5-year progression, the 2019 test is very different from the 2021 test. The 2022 test is actually was how we had it pre-pandemic, and then they changed it for the 2023 test, which is the same for the 2024 test. So it's hard to compare exactly like the effects of it because of those shifts. But I still think it's important for us to track that data, because anytime we do curriculum adoptions or kind of reviewing our kind of next steps, making the plans, we always look at like 4 or 5 years of data. And we break it down in much greater detail, like this is such a broad overview, like when we look at our benchmark reports, we really see by detail exactly what the breakdown happens. But we definitely have space to recover. Yeah.
Forgive me if this is coming up. Would you have this slide and then the math one compared to pure talent?
So if you jump ahead to math.
Look at that.
You can see our math, student math scores. We have had greater success in student recovery. We have a lot of things that we've put in place. There's been a lot of work around increasing math fluency, looking at strengthening students' number sense at the early grades. We have intervention programs, so we are monitoring and tracking students' response to intervention. We do benchmark testing with the district when students are struggling. We determine what interventions need to be put in place, monitor the effect of those. So you can see our grade 3 and 4 are surpassing pre-pandemic levels. 5 and 6, again, we've seen growth in those scores from the initial dip, but there's still room for growth there. But if you jump ahead, I want to show you the comparisons to the other regional districts. So if you look at all of it, and it's sorted by 2024, the most recent data. If you look at our map comparison to all of our regional communities, Norfolk is in the top quartile. We do have an aging math program, and we are in the process of reviewing, and we need to adopt a new math curriculum next year. So we're probably supplementing that. I think Vicki has worked very closely with our math coaches to modernize and bring some supplementary materials in to strengthen the program, but it is something. So that's in our recommendation. You can jump ahead to ELA. Norfolk's really in the middle of the comparison path in terms of ELA. Again, we are delayed in being able to implement the new curriculum. We have adopted a new ELA program. We're in the first year of implementation. We have been monitoring our district assessments and district screeners, and we're already seeing a positive trend upwards. So we do project that we will see growth in the upcoming MCAS scores as a result of that. So we're about in the middle of the pack, a little higher than the middle. And again, we expect now we have 1 year of the new program in place that addresses a lot of the areas of gaps. And our other local measures are projecting a positive recovery rate. Also, just we always present in February to the school committee a baseline and benchmark reports. It's on our website, but it gives comparisons of our performance academically, local measures, for people, class size, anything you want to know, and it is on the front page of the website. Per pupil spending we've talked about before, you can see back in 2016, we were spending closer to what the average of the state was for per pupil costs. That gap has continued to grow from 220 to 223. It's really gotten significantly wider. Again, we're highly impacted by what we talked about before, the more competitive grants being focused on our suburban, our rural districts or our underperforming districts. So where it used to be, a few $100s under the state, we're now at 4,000 under the state average per pupil spend.
So is there a slide like this with our comparable communities?
Yes, next slide.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you look, again, Norfolk and Berkeley have consistently, probably in the last 10 years, been the bottom of the comparison groups for Berkeley.
How do we come up with these comps? Because some of them are towns of over 20,000 people. Berkeley has about 4,000 people.
Yeah, so they're provided to us by the Department of Education, and they are considered to be like communities partially because they're structured. They don't have high schools. They're regional systems and like demographics. So when based on all the data in the state, they will give you your regional or your 10 comp communities that are most like. However, what I wanted to highlight in here is that we put in green districts that are spending under the state average. So you can see that that number is growing of these suburban communities from year to year to year. And again, that's a function of the Chapter 70 lag, the minimum 80 communities, and the direction of competitive grants towards more rural and urban areas. So it's not just Norfolk. You could see like back in 2021, there were only 3 of us under the state average. Now more than half of our communities is spending less than the state average.
Okay, there it is. Never mind.
You can jump in there. We're going to go into you guys understand charter school impact. We talked about that before. You can go to the next slide. So to highlight the 2026 budget request, we are currently at 4.59%. Again, reflects about $1 million of cuts from a level service budget. What it does allow us to do is meet contractual obligations for staffing. So cost of living increases and teacher contract. It's a very slight market adjustment to the rate of pay for our substitute teachers. We're having a difficult time getting staff to come into the building. And we have to, our regional comparison communities are raising their sub rates. We have to stay competitive for that. We're only partially funding the adoption of the math curriculum, so that was one of the cuts that we made. The new math program is expected to be about $250,000. We have about $125,000 budgeted. We are working actively to negotiate with vendors, splitting that cost over 2 fiscal years, with the intent of implementing next year. So that was one of our reductions. It does allow us to meet the increased special education funding to meet the increased costs we're facing for transportation and tuitions. And it maintains most of our class sizes within the school committee policy limit. Second grade will be exceeding the max policy limit next year.
Can I ask a quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, did you have something to add? I became interested in state mandates recently. Is the math program and the English language program, is that a mandate from the State Department of Education?
So the state has mandated that districts adopt high quality instructional materials. They've curated lists of programs that they consider high quality. We did have to change our VLA program because it was not on the list. Our math program currently is 7 years old and it's out of print, so we can't purchase it again. So we have to change.
It requires school districts to adopt.
One of the selected choices.
There's no pushback on mandates
Oh, there's lots, I can't say that that's effective, but there's a lot of pushback around that funded mandates.
The state asks me to submit a report to them, not just us, that's it, but
Sure, yeah.
that's how they kind of do it.
Okay. Thank you.
So, as far as staffing, we are making some staffing reductions, there'll be 2 paraprofessional positions eliminated, 1 6 professional positions, so we have a teacher retirement that we won't be replacing. We are reducing our position by 0.1, and we are still finalizing another 0.5 professional position reduction. And a 0.2 other position reduction for a total of 3.8. Other savings that we are working on, we are restructuring our business office. So we currently have an HR director who is retiring at the end of this year. Somewhat of a unicorn. She works incredibly long hours and she also does payroll. So she really does 2 jobs. That's not replaceable. But we are going to try to replace the HR director position with just an HR specialist at a lower salary versus an HR director. We've had some conversations about sharing potential services or consultation with the town. We're still working through that. And we are going to we have an assistant business manager position. We are changing that from an assistant business manager to a payroll accounts payable position at a lower salary rate. We have a business consultant that oversees the business office who's here tonight to answer more detailed questions you may have. And we are reallocating an additional paraprofessional position to mass support at the upper grades where to try to target those areas we're seeing some specific gaps. But
Can I ask you a question with the payroll? There are companies that offer services that do that. Is there a special twist to what goes on at a school level that?
Mary,
So we're using a company already in conjunction with the town, so our school payroll ties into the town as a whole
Okay.
for their purpose.
yes. But we still have to enter all the data, track attendance,
All right.
all of that part.
That's sort of where I was going with that. Thank you.
Budget changes, this is just the a summary of what's changing in our budget. The 569 is the cost of teacher step lane changes. We do back out retirement savings, so we have 3 teachers retiring, that's what we project saving on those positions. The paraprofessionals, again, we are reducing 2 positions, but we also have a COLA built in for the remaining, so that is savings of about 14,000. Changes for all of the staff, so that's cost of living increases for food service, custodial, secretarial staff, about 35,000. Sub rate increase that I talked about earlier, and then other contractual and contractual benefits that we're obligated to fund. So the total change on the staffing side is about 560,000.
The retirements and resignations, that's a net cost. It assumes lower salaries for all 3 of them.
Sure. It's 3 positions. If we have a teacher and we know who these people are, so we budget for new hires at Masters 5. A master's is required, and we generally have people that come in with 4 or 5 years experience. If we hire less than that, that's great, but some positions, special ed positions, speech and language, generally are 8 or 9 or higher, so we budget the average. So a teacher leaving at the top of the scale is like over 100, so we net about 30,000, depending on where people. So that's the net what we'll save. On the budget side, we worked really hard with the budget subcommittee to reduce expenses. Again, the math curriculum is only partially funded. We have 100,000 in the curriculum line this year. We're adding 25, so it'll be 125 total in that line. The program will cost about 250, split over 2 years. We are down. We've cut significantly from the FA services and HR services and supplies as well as HLFA. I just have to say to the committee, we have level funded expense lines for probably 4 or 5 years, even though expense inflation has costs. So to cut from level funding after multiple years, we are really mean. That's why we don't have copies today. We are really trying to be tight on ordering and reducing paper, reducing copiers, print supplies, all of that. So those are both down. Special ed instructional services is increased for next year by about 106,000. You can see the circuit breaker offset, that is funding that we receive from circuit breaker. We also are special ed transportation is up. Our general pupil transportation, contract with homes has increased. District offices and supplies we've cut, so all of our supply lines are down. Facilities and technology network, slightly up. Net change 150,000. Just so you know, the cost reflect, we are also, as part of our savings, recommending we access another 50,000 of special ed stabilization. That we have 250,000 total, we used 125 last year, we're asking for another 50. It's gonna leave us with a balance of 75,000 in that account.
Karen, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What was the original intent of that fund?
So that's a good question. Years ago, when we were budgeting for special education tuitions, most districts across the Commonwealth, the best practice was that you budgeted for a placeholder. So you had maybe an $85,000 tuition placeholder in your budget, so that if the student moved in during the district that was unbudgeted, you didn't have to go back to town meeting to ask for funding just to cover that child's tuition. Norfolk is not in a position where we, at least in the last 8 or 9 years, where we've been able to put an extra placeholder in our budget. So what we did was, COVID, I think it was May of 2019, we had revenue at the end of the fiscal year. Typically that gets returned to the town, becomes your free cash. We recommended building a special education stabilization account and putting the money that we had left at the end of the year into a separate account that, and you, under the Mass State law, you're allowed to do that. That would allow us not to carry a placeholder, but have the ability to respond to unexpected tuitions. So that account, I have 250,000, we put 125 and the town matched it. That was appropriated that May town meeting. We haven't used it since then, although we did use half of it last year. So that's what that purpose is. And it has to be used for unexpected tuitions or transportation costs for special education. It can't be used for any other purpose.
Okay, thank you. And have you made an additional request to the town with the free cash to replenish that account?
We have not.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is something that could be considered at all through the meeting.
Cost savings, we're constantly trying to find ways to reduce funds. We have probably a number of years now, we've worked with the town to share services for facilities, for our facilities director and for a shared custodial position that sends us, saves us annual, about $30,000 annually. 2 years ago, we worked with Bethany Plainville and we regionalized our school lunch program. We used to have a full-time food service director for Norfolk. We now have one food service director shared between the 3 towns. So that saves us money annually. We also cost share our professional development. So as they brought up earlier, there's lots of unfunded mandates, annual required trainings that we are that we have to provide for all of our staff. We now share a lot of those with KP Bentham and King Philip, so we cost share that, as well as when we bring in high quality presenters, we share those costs. We are restructuring our business office. We had anticipated needing to add a payroll person, a payroll specialist for 25,000, but by merging and shifting all those positions, we've been able to absorb. We did secure a regional behavioral health grant that's funding some of our positions in professional development. And then we have 3 additional grants that we are in the process. We're projecting based on our last year's allocations that we will be successful in securing some of that funding. So about 276,000 for cost sharing.
Question.
Sure.
What's the opioid settlement money being used for?
That funded a part-time social worker position. It's actually 0.1, it's 30,000 over 3 years. So we increased that position to support. It has parameters around what you can fund with it. But that provided additional counseling support for students.
Is it? I'm sorry to ask this, but is it sort of family based?
It's regulated by the AG's office, right? Type.
No, I understand that part, but I mean, I'm assuming it's like concerns that family issues that around opioid addiction and things like that.
No, it's more preventatively, so provide.
There could be, so that covers it. If someone could come in, I have a problem with it, and so it's covered. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We can go to the next slide. I don't have to go into all of those in detail, but basically shows that 94% approximately of our budget is fixed costs, salaries, bus contracts, tuitions, tuition. One thing that we've really focused on, and I think we've done a great job, our special education director has done a fabulous job. In Norfolk, we only have, I think it's 4 students that are outplaced, five now. We've worked really hard to build in their some programs. We think it's best for kids to be able to be educated in their home school. And that all children deserve, to be connected to their home school as to the best of our ability to provide them services. So that's reduced a lot of tuition and transportation costs, and I think provided strong programming for all of our children. Next slide. I won't go into this, but you can take a look. It just shows you the breakdown of our budget. And what you can see reflected is that it's only 1% of our budget that is tuitions, 1.2%. The largest pieces of the pie are salaries, and then the 8.7 in green is transportation. It's contracted service, most of that is transportation contract.
What's the yellow? Sorry, I can't see. the
Others.
color.
Those other salaries, so that would
Okay,
be,
thank
so the blue is professional salaries, teachers, paraprofessionals, then there's, clerical salaries, and then other would be food service, custodial services.
See the big one, but not the little.
The enrollment class sizes, again, as I shared earlier, we will be within class size policy limit in most grades. Grade 3, when I talked about one of the professional positions we're reducing, we are not replacing a teaching position that's retiring. So our grade 3 class sizes are high to start the year, 23 and 24. Max class size of that grade is 25. And max class size for K-2 is 21. We will be over the maximum class size in grade 2. We are not adding a classroom teaching position to bring that under the class size, but we also do not have a physical classroom that we could add. We are out of space. So there's 2 kind of factors that are driving that decision. So you can see the projected class size, a decrease to our current FTEs from this year. That's the retirement.
Can I ask, I'm not familiar with the term, the max class size. What's the implication that who enforces that, and what are the implications if we exceed it?
That's a good question. So it's different in every community, and many districts is part of the teacher's contract that they establish a maximum class size. In Norfolk, it is not part of the teacher's contract because it's always been a school committee policy. So the school committee has a policy with a maximum class size of 25 for grades 3 to 6 and 21 for K-2. If you look at the baseline and benchmarks report, you can see how that compares. We are not on the small side of our regional comparisons for class size. Urban districts like Boston and Cambridge have a max class size of 21. And
So to play that back, aside from violating our own policy, there's no grant implications, there's no other implications other than we're not meeting our own standard.
In this case, because it's not part of our collective bargaining agreement. It does impact staffing, so when we increase that, we've tried to put more staffing in place for our teachers. But no, right now, that will be, we'll have 21 and 22. Then it is, school committee will have to vote to raise the maximum class size. But we're kind of up against it, because if they don't, we don't have a classroom. So it's certainly not ideal. The committee has been committed to, if we're outside, adding our professional and additional teaching staff to keep our teaching ratio.
Thank you.
Ask a question, Paul. What, some of you were teachers at some point, what's the biggest class size you want? This is foreign to me, so how many kids is too many?
I mean,
In reality, what's the?
I mean,
Is that?
21 is K-2 too. That's on the higher end. If you look at our regional comparisons, a lot of communities have 18, 19 in their lower grade.
And the older kids?
25 is the max I've seen in most places, even Boston and urban Worcester, 25 is the max. We don't teach the way we used to, like a lot of instruction is small group. We're working with students at different levels of instruction, so the more groups you have, the less one-on-one time students to get with their teacher. So that also plays into it.
This is maybe an obvious question, and I apologize. The pluses and minuses in number of teachers, you're just moving teachers up and down.
Yes, we asked before about how we budget, and we do go from a zero-based budget. So we budget the number of sessions based on the number of students. So every year we have to keep moving classes. So when you see 7 for first grade, that'll be down to, we currently have 9. So it's just reflecting the change from last year and showing, again, our teachers are assigned based on the enrollment that we currently have.
What do they call it? They get to advance or whatever they call it when they move with
They graduate.
they cohort, they're going with that cohort.
With the year classes, yeah, that's happening.
But actually, can I ask a follow-up on that? Is that actually ideal for teachers to be moving around grade levels? Because then you lose that consistency of having a teacher who is familiar with the curriculum for that specific grade.
Yeah,
So,
it's a good question. It depends. So, what I would say with that is that sometimes there is value in looping on depending on these students. Our teachers are licensed on the 6 or pre-K to 2. The curriculum programs are the same. So you're using the same ELA program. It might be different content from grade to grade, but we do provide mentoring for teachers that are making grade level changes. So for the state, and a new teacher has 3 years of mentoring for the local district. If you make a grade level change, you also have a grade level teacher that is supporting that instruction. So sometimes it's energizing for people to have a new curriculum, and we do that. Oftentimes, we post the positions, teachers may apply if they want to make that kind of grade level change, but we make sure people are supported if they are making a shift in instruction.
Sometimes it's nice for teachers that have moved grade levels to have that little more. So that actually strengthens who they want to do.
Because they know
What to teach. They know what the next year is going to teach or
Yeah.
Maybe
the baseline was the year before.
Oh, this is tough. Here, so it does have.
It's not a feeling nobody wants to make a grade level teacher, you have to, but yeah, it is
Kind of.
yeah, they're usually good about it.
Thank you.
There's your class size comparisons. I won't get into it, but you can look at this. This is all in the content. Again, this is in the baseline report. So if you want to take a look. I've got the budget needs again. And last year we cut positions too. So last year we cut our tech integration position, we cut our library support, we cut clerical support. For a long time, we wanted to bring back our health education program. We do not have health teachers in Norfolk. We cut our special education building substitute, so we don't have a sub pool. We're often having to pull teachers or pull administrators to cover classrooms. And then you see on the left the positions that are being the classroom teacher that we are not filling, that's driving our class sizes in 3rd grade up. Ideally, we would be able to fill that and bring back the library system classroom. Expenses, again, ideally we'd be fully funding the math adoption, we wouldn't be touching the stabilization funds. We cut all of our supplemental technology subscriptions, so we have programs and resources that supplement the curriculum, math-backed fluency programs, ELA programs, those are all reduced in this budget. We cut all the capital funding, we have a replacement plan for teacher laptops and technology that's every 7 years. We're delaying that because we don't have the revenue to tackle copier replacements, laptop replacements. Hoping to consider the fall town capital process to meet some of those needs. And we've also made reductions to professional development funding that we really should be growing, but we just aren't able to grow.
Said 7 years on the laptop replacement.
That's the replacement cycle for our teacher laptops, and it's long. But it's difficult, and even the Chromebooks and things for students. We had to make some replacements because the older Chromebooks won't we can't take them. That's they're not current enough, so we have to
The hamsters die that are running the things.
We're very good at repurposing and stretching and maximizing life, but those are all things that are benefit again. We're at 4.5 again. It's about $1 million cuts that we made this year. We know, and I'm sure the question coming to town has been at 4.3. And we were at 4.0. They were able to get to 4.3, but still a gap in the school budget. A week ago, we just released an early retirement incentive. We are hoping that we may have 1 or 2 people take that, but will allow us to come down to 4.5 to where the town has us at 4.3. And we are actively looking at other possible ways that we need to, and that doesn't yield the savings.
Is that incentive adding credible service or something like that rather than a financial one, or is it a credit one?
I'm sorry.
Is it a financial incentive or
It's financial
for service?
No, incentive. If we, and it's pending whether or not we have funding available at the end of this year, which is pending what happens with the reimbursement, as we talked about a little bit.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question, Chair? So I have, and I, not to make more work for you, because I know I write grants myself, so I know it's very time consuming. But have you looked at private foundations or companies, for instance, like the band fees? Is there a foundation that supports the arts that we can look at, or for the technology? Have you explored any of those options?
We have, and we've been successful in securing quite a few private grants for our technology program. We've gotten robotics grants, we've gotten a lot of STEM equipment through private corporation grants. We have not had, we've had cultural council grants that have brought in our programs to students, not anything that would waive band fees that we've seen. We don't have a full-time grant position, which would be ideal, but we do pursue a lot of private grants, and that's through department heads. Our tech integration teacher has written grants, teachers write grants, Vicky's written quite a few. But it is a position that we talked about that in the future, I think would be from a creative partnership with the town if we want to explore a grant position.
Yeah, I mean, if we're not going to be competitive for the state grants, I think it's in our best interest to pursue that. So anyway, thank you.
Sure.
Are y'all, is that it?
That's it. I don't know the things.
Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah, Jonathan. Oh.
Yep.
Oh. Jonathan? What's up?
May I pose a question to our school committee members? Not to put you on the spot, but two parts to this. Is there anything in the budget proposal you are not in support of? And conversely, is there anything that is not in the budget that you'd like to see?
So that's a good question. I would say ourselves as well as the admin team are completely in agreement with the budget that we presented, mainly because we did a lot of on the background and a lot of extra budget meetings to get to that point. We had disagreements kind of going into it. There was a bunch of back and forth about where we thought the cuts should come from. We knew we kind of wanted to get to the same place with a similar number to present to you all. And there was give and take on both sides. So I think as I mentioned in the public forum, one of the hardest hits was to see a reduction in teaching staff. I think Peter and I both came at it from, direct education support was the priority. And so seeing us have to reduce a teacher kind of hurt, and I really didn't want to see that. But we do have, we've also discussed priorities. If we do get more teachers buying into the early retirement incentive and they're able to get a credit, that would be the first thing that's funded. Ideally, I'd love to see both teaching positions, one at HOD restored as well as Vernon Kennedy, but the one at HOD is kind of a twofold. Like even if we did restore that position, we don't have a physical space unless we lose the art room. And that would change the art curriculum significantly, and that would be a shame. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, you're in concurrence?
I'm in concurrence. Yeah, I would just add that, again, like we did restore that math sport, which we lost last year. And I think with every cycle, like part of the creativity of working together is to restore what we have lost over the last few years. And, first and foremost, support for the teachers and ultimately for the students and their core academic needs. So it's not easy, but I feel good about some of the things that we were able to restore as part of this budget as well.
Awesome.
So I was gonna ask, I know at a lot of the school committee meetings, we hear about gifts that are given usually from the PTO, maybe some other organizations. Do you feel like that's significant portion of supporting some of the things that aren't getting into the budget, or is it becoming a more significant portion?
I wouldn't say it's a significant portion, it's pretty small. I think the gift amount, Mary, you would know, 35,000 maybe.
There's very small amount and mostly goes towards supplemental materials. So I don't think that it would be a significant.
Yeah, so it never goes towards anything that is like required, it's sort of nice to have.
Correct.
A lot of the gifts that we received are targeted. So we might receive a gift for a purchase of adaptive seating, or so they're targeted, they're not just things that we can repurpose. But I would say that we have worked really closely with the PTO, and the PTO has been fantastic about fundraising. We are cutting technology subscriptions, so we have programs that really help our kids develop their math fluency. Our teachers are writing grants to the PTO to try to fund some of those programs that are most essential through the PTO teacher grant. So we are partnering in that way. But I would say the general, yes, mostly directed for particular purposes, scholarships for Borndale, things like, oh, we're going to Burgess this year, but scholarship funding, things like that.
Oh, the loss of Borndale has been felt broadly, as you know. To the parents who had to sleep overnight 10 years ago, so.
Well, it's sale, and then.
I heard that, yeah, I understand there's a much deeper story there.
The purchase it, David, and solve everybody's problem. You could purchase one down.
Yeah, one money.
I would say, as Rich talked a little bit about the funding from the shelter, so just recently it was reapproved, reauthorized as part of the supplementary budget. So our story is a little bit different because we negotiated with the Department of Education to provide grant funding for us up front to address the cost of the two L teachers that we had to add. So we received $140,000.
Roughly 148,000 towards the cost of those two teachers.
That we've already received. So that funding funded the cost of the two teachers. We also successfully secured a $250,000 grant to renovate space at the Freeman Kennedy to move our special education offices over. The $104 a day we will also receive, but we will not receive the $104 until we've exceeded what they've already given us for the two teachers. Does that make sense? So we are expecting a check in March, but we did receive the first reimbursement because we had that money front loaded. We will receive a reimbursement in March and then again in August. If that's where we're hoping, if we receive that money, we'll be able to creatively use it to fund the early retirement incentive to generate savings next year.
Chair, can I ask one?
Kevin's got a question.
Yeah, you can go first. I gotta sleep.
Okay, not to open up a can of worms, and if you haven't thought about it, it's totally fine. I know you've been busy working on budget, but given that the expansion did not pass, what is the contingency plan? Obviously, we're seeing now the class sizes have to increase because we don't have the space to add additional classrooms. So what is the contingency?
So it's gonna have to be multi-pronged. So the first thing that we are doing, we requested to the school committee and to the select board, their last night's meeting. That they vote to authorize us to submit an application for funding for the community expansion project to MSBA. We are going to apply, and that will be the application to be by April 10th. If we were, then MSBA would provide probably, I mean, in the last two projects, it was 53% of state funds, so it would dramatically reduce the cost of an admission. If we were selected by MSBA, they would also assign a new architectural firm, and we would have to redo portions of the feasibility study. There'd be an opportunity within that to make adjustments that we needed to the proposed projects. So that's the first thing. Applying does not commit you to moving forward. It's just, there's no harm in applying to see if we can generate some additional revenue. Additionally, we're going to be expanding the building committee will shift to a working group, and we are trying to expand that committee to bring more community voices in to look at temporary and short-term and long-term options. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you.
So first, you heard when I was speaking to Rich about his gap between what he identified as a needs-based budget versus where he came in at the end. You similarly identified a level service budget being around 10%, which I think might be the highest that I've ever heard it.
Yeah, and it's because of the $300,000 shortfall from last year, it's those one-time funds. And actually, if we, this budget, if we accounted for the 300,000, if that was in the operating budget, you're looking at a 2.6% increase
Gotcha.
from what we actually spent this year.
Okay, so I think my question is more about looking forward, right? Looking ahead to 27 and 28. This trend is obviously not sustainable, right?
It is not sustainable.
Have you given any foresight or thought into any actions that we can take going into this operating year to be able to potentially offset what that's going to look like come budget presentation time next time?
So we are starting to talk about, additional areas, but it isn't sustainable. And I think, Justin, we've talked a little bit about the town needing to look at its overall revenue picture. I think that's gonna have to happen. I mean, we're exhausting one-time funds. We can't control special education costs. They have been increasing. We have done everything we can to build strong internal programs. We have worked hard to try to regionalize services in any place that we can. We have talked to KP about potentially sharing some business services next year, so we're exploring things like that.
Good.
And our schools are growing. I mean, Greenland's gonna be almost 600 students. They're not small local elementary schools anymore. So that drives some critical staffing needs. I think we are exploring options, but I think the town also has to really look at the overall revenue, because it's gonna affect every operating budget. And I know you've been working with Southwood property and looking at other possibilities, but it isn't sustainable year to year to balance your budget. But and then Rich talked about that with emergency and efficiency funds. It's not long term. It's not strong long term budget.
Got it. Speaking about one-time use funds, obviously using 50K from the special education stabilization, where has that fund typically been replenished from in the past?
It's never been replenished. So we never had a stabilization fund. We built it in 2019 and started with 250,000. We've never touched it until this year. And we budgeted 125,000 this year. So we've never depleted it before. This is the first time that fund balance is down. There isn't a plan right now because the towns are using a large amount of free cash to balance the budget on their side for replenishing that. I think long term, that also has to be looked at because we want to go back to having to build contingency in the operating budgets year to year.
Yep.
We'll be leading with a balance of 75,000 next year, which barely covers the cost of tuition, doesn't cover transportation.
Gotcha, thank you. You already touched on the shelter impacts. Obviously, I just really wanted to know about should we follow the plan and the shelter does end up closing this summer and there is no longer any student population, what kind of impact that would have, but it sounds like that's already been accommodated for.
Yeah, and I think we're in a different position from KP, so we have 2 L positions this year that we added to meet the needs of students. We are not anticipating carrying those positions, as L service next year. Now, both of our teachers are licensed as general education, so how positions shuffle around, but we are not budgeting to carry L service, the traditional L service.
Thank you. You mentioned before about the difficulty in being able to maintain substitute teachers and getting them in. You had cited the increase in rate to try to stay competitive. You do know that I love myself a CompSet analysis grid. How do we line up against the neighboring communities? Are we really far behind? And that's
so we are not really far behind. Everybody is experiencing some shortage. I don't know why anybody doesn't want to come work in our fabulous schools. It's a great place to be, but since COVID, it's been really hard to get people to come into the schools. I think more people, more of our families have 2 parents working. The economy has definitely impacted people. It's been it's tough, but it's not Norfolk alone. Rentham, Franklin, everybody is dealing with some shortage. So we're slightly under, maybe $500 a day under. We're trying to get so that we're aligned again. So we're not going to exceed what other people are offering. We originally hoped to be a little more competitive, but we had to pull that back in this budget. So we'll be closely aligned to what KP and other regional districts are. It won't fix the situation. There's just, we're trying to recruit. If anybody knows anyone that wants to be a sub in the schools, we love their contact information, but it's been a really hard year for district.
Can I ask a quick follow-on? What is the rate? What's the daily, is it a daily rate?
It's different kind of positions. So we have a salary for paraprofessionals, a salary for nurses,
Classroom teacher rate is
You want to just,
Teaching is $115 a day currently. We're proposing it to be probably just under 122 per day.
they're not dramatic increases for that.
No, I just.
Some students, we have a lot of, in May and during March, because we have a lot of college kids that come, but
My brother used to substitute a long time ago. It was $50 a day and it was $50 a day forever. So that's why I was asking.
And my last one is just to follow up with Jonathan's inquiry relating class sizes and how in some cases that's part of collective bargaining, knowing that we're coming up in 1 year to renegotiate again and remembering that our last cycle was, for lack of a better term, robust dialogue, to say the least. How are you anticipating some of these changes being reflective or adding to that conversation?
well, I think, we will be negotiating a new contract next year with the Norfolk Teachers Association. The class size issue has, as I said, has never been an issue at the bargaining table because the school committee had a policy in place. This is the second time in the time that I've been here, we've exceeded that in a grade level. There was a year we went to 22 in kindergarten and 2 classes, and the school committee appropriated funds for an additional assistant. Since that time, we have never exceeded the class size policy. So does that become a bargaining concern? I certainly think that teachers know that the class sizes are on the higher end of our region. As I said, the way we teach students is very different. It's a lot more small group with tailored instruction. So does that become a bargaining issue? Very possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
Question about enrollment. So I feel like we've been ringing the bell locally about enrollment's going up. But we're not hearing that from KP. Their numbers show a decline, and so where's the disconnect? Why is it there's so much enrollment's going up so high in Norfolk, but KP is not saying a word about it and showing that the enrollment's going down?
So I can project 2 possible reasons for that. One, our enrollment, when we did the most recent demographic study, our enrollment is starting at the lower grades. So we have the most enrollment has happened in the adult day, 123, and we're now just seeing it go into the premium Kennedy, we're about 63 students. So I would predict that as these kids age up, KP is going to see an increase. We always share the data with them so that they are aware of that. I would also say that we do lose students at the middle and high school to private schools, which is Dean and the Varian, other kinds of, and to the vocab. So some of that's different. I also believe, and I have certainly enrollment in Plainville had experienced a decline, but sometimes the enrollment in Norfolk might go up, it affects our assessment. But so there's a number of factors that I think impact that. I don't want to speak for it, but I think as our larger class sizes are rolling out, it definitely is going to start.
I have a question and it's more of a comment based on some of the popular issues you're raising relative to revenues. I've asked, and we've talked about it at one of these meetings with Justin. There's been discussion of having an operating override at some point in the future. It's my personal belief, and I don't know how many of the members share it, is that people needed to be aware now what would happen if we don't do things like, and I focused on free cash because free cash technically is a one-time revenue.
Yeah.
If we took out the 1.1 that we're considering doing for free cash this year, it would impact your budget, the town's budget, and KP's budget. Those are the kinds of numbers that need to be discussed. There needs to be the wrong word for it, contingency budget in that sense. I'm not saying that this committee is posing the appropriation of free cash for that, but it's going to be hard to say next year we've been running a 1.1 million or $2 million deficit for however long to get back to what we feel is a level of service budget for everyone if we haven't talked about it. So those are the kinds of, like, if we took your money, we took more money away from you is what I'm kind of interested in finding out at some point. And I haven't defined the question yet. Justin and I have talked about it a couple of times, but it's a question I think needs to be publicly discussed if you're gonna come, if the town leadership is gonna come before the town for an operating override, it's gonna be hard to tell the story unless you've been explaining it before you ask for the money, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, and I do think for the last, at least 3 or 4 years, we've been cutting tuition every year. And so I definitely think they're, and we've also been using one-time funds.
Right,
So,
and it's the one-time fund part that has been making me uncomfortable. And
and it's also
COVID-
not the space.
the COVID money saved the town's butt
It did.
for the last 3 years, and it's
And
now
for
totally gone. It's totally gone, and now we're faced with entirely funding our deficit out of the cash, so. Except for your special education,
growth
yeah.
that we're experiencing with revenue shrinking and growth happening, so it is challenging.
Okay, that's it from me. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'll send you the link to them, recorded to anybody want to get together here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See you later.
I forgot to mention, I did forward, to the committee, this afternoon or this evening. Justin had a meeting last night where they went through some stuff with school, select board, and he wanted to just give us an update on what he sent us. Want to pull up the table? I think it's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward, so I'll just run through pretty briefly, what we've done. So the last time I was here with you, we had a $1.3 million deficit, I believe. And so what we have now is a $1.1 million deficit. John, the changes we made, we added $100,000 in revenue to ambulance receipts. We have that, we've received those funds, generally. Well, what we've done is we've allocated that additional revenue towards paying for ambulance debt. For example, in the budget transfers, you're going to see $100,000 or $115,000 transfer for ambulance debt. I feel comfortable increasing it $100,000. I feel comfortable enough because we did have an allocation of $300,000 in the economic bond bill. We're hoping to get those funds. If we do, then obviously we'd allocate it to the ambulance. So $100,000 additional revenue. The changes in the budget element was largely in police. In police, the board did decide to potentially freeze a potential vacancy next year. So that was $85,000. It wasn't $100,000. They had miscalculated something, so we didn't have a degree. So $85,000, $30,000 in potential, salary savings. With transition from chief the other employee. We removed $28,000 for the body cameras. We're going to apply for another grant or look for an earmark for that. They decided to fill the fire EMT paramedic position, so no change there. King Philip did reduce their assessment, and Rich talked about, so that's provided about $40,000 in savings. The board, we had 4% initially on Norfolk Elementary. They just discussed 4.59. We said, let's meet in the middle. So we just put in 4.3. And hopefully, with the retirement incentive that's realized there. And we did decide to utilize $8,000 in council on aging grants to help fund the salary. So those changes brought our deficit to $1.1 million. And I think the board is comfortable with proceeding there. But one other thing that they did confirm and we're going to proceed with is we are going to put an article on the warrant to utilize stabilization funds to fund Tri-County. And really now it's not even a question. I know we had this debate the last time. We have $1.7 million in free cash right now. So if we use 1.1 to fund the deficit, that leaves us $600,000. We're going to have a $200,000 in snow and ice deficit that we have to account for. About $10,000 for fire for EMS services, and potentially we got a green community grant for the solar array on Freedom County, but we might need to pull up maybe $20,000 to $50,000. But even before that, we have $390,000 in free cash left. Tri County's 405, so we don't have enough free cash to cover it fully anyway. So that's why we're going to go to the stabilization fund.
And where's that money coming from? the stabilization fund?
from the stabilization.
Put into the stabilization
Oh,
fund.
We have like $2.5 million in our stabilization.
I referred to it last time. It's also called the rainy day fund.
Gotcha.
So when we have free cash that is extra, as it were, we just stick it in there.
Yeah, so pretty much every fall we put money in there. It's good for bond rating, et cetera, but it's there for a reason and now we have to utilize it.
So we're gonna wipe it.
Well, I was about to say, I mean, I said it at the last time we talked about this, is that we could be putting money back into the stabilization fund at fall town meeting, depending on where our free cash is. We could also put it into the special ed stabilization fund or OPED or some of the other things.
Yeah, I mean, generally, so for example, I'll use last time meeting as an example, because obviously if you use a stabilization fund, my best practical policy is to replenish it, right? But, we have a lot of competing forces. I want to provide an example for schools. Last year, at the November town meeting, instead of $100,000 in the special ed stabilization fund to replenish it, we gave them $100,000 for the ELA curriculum as a free cash transfer. Typically, they've covered that in their operating budgets, but we gave them additional allocation of that. So it's just really competing with a lot of forces here.
And we don't know what that number is going to be until the summertime.
Is there any capital on this?
No, not bringing capital in me.
I have a question,
Sure.
and I don't know if anyone in this room has the answer, but is there anything we can do with the CPC?
Not beyond what they get put before them.
But
It's a very limited.
uses that.
You can't use it for salaries. You can't use it from like general maintenance. That Bob and I were having
Would the
discussion.
best case be
It's largely for capital
connected?
and investments in those.
that's what we took.
Those three main areas: open space and recreation, affordable housing, and historic. And we
Don't have it.
So you'll go into fall with about 300,000 in free cash.
Yeah, right, yeah.
this year.
I mean, obviously too, though, free cash gets certified at that point too. So it's going to be higher once free cash is certified, because there will definitely be additional free cash certified. I've been very conservative on our side. We've held positions vacant for a long time, realizing that we're walking into. So there will be some additional free cash on it, but it's not going to be to the extent that we've seen lately.
You know, the town side where we're at budget wise right now, like for example, we're 72% through the fiscal year where you get that printout from use the admin.
Todd's going to give an update pretty soon there. The last time we were, tracking very well. We've been pretty good with maintaining our budget. So
Todd does quarterly updates for the board that include how you're performing against budget.
Basically.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What I want
To set it up.
it's, I mean, we admins instead of units, I can go to print.
Yeah.
It's just 2 pages for me. It's relatively line items and. But right at the bottom, boom, there's a percentage. I'm at 65.96 right now, 72% for the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question about something that came up tonight and came up when you made the presentation, and it also came up last week when the CPC was here? Our facilities director is leaving.
Correct.
You're accounting for a savings there. Are you replacing?
We're not accounting for savings there.
No, you're accounting for one of those positions not being filled. He was the deputy. He's now the director.
That's not true. So we have a facilities director and we have a deputy that's in place now.
So the gentleman who, Matt, was leaving he's the director.
Correct.
Are you replacing him?
Absolutely. We're going to try. We're trying.
What was the savings that was in, there was some discussion.
It was a discussion item. So remember the presentation was a discussion item for the board.
So they decided to fill it.
Yeah.
So
We need to fill that position.
the director and the deputy director.
Correct. Yeah.
So the savings that's represented in her budget is just the gap between Matt not being here and Matt's replacement.
No, I think she presented that as.
Like $1,000. It's not that much, but
If I look at the presentation, it was presented in a manner I probably would have presented. So what we do is we split the salary and we think, no, it's entitled for the savings.
He's assuming Matt's replacement isn't starting the day after Matt leaves, I think, right?
No, because all right, so Ingrid and I want to fill this position this year, so it has no impact on the next year's budget. Except depending where the person comes in. I would just say,
Has a $25,000 savings.
I look at. I'll tell you why, because I think I want to point out referencing to make sure of him. So cost savings for fiscal 26 budget, it says shared facilities director, deputy director, right? I don't agree with that. We saw our conversation today. I don't see that.
And that number is wrong.
I don't know. I don't know what she's representing there.
I will email her and CC you, or I'll email you both and say, can you guys clarify this?
Yeah. I think she can clarify that because there's, we've been sitting on interviewing and she wants to. Yeah.
Right. So,
We're welcome. All right.
we're not here to touch you.
No, that's fine. I like you guys. When are you talking further about our budget? Or do you want to?
Yeah, planning next week, and then we have you guys coming back the following week.
All right, so you know who you want to hear from? More police, probably.
We should talk about that. But
Yeah.
Is there any department, is anyone very interested in hearing from a department that we hired?
Yeah.
Fine, please. All right, thank you. Sorry, what was it?
No, it's okay.
We're not filling a deputy's position, or we're not, where there's a position that's not being filled.
No, it is being filled.
It's for being filled. When this proposal is being fulfilled.
Police is losing.
Police is in a potential position. That person we expect is going to transition on and we're going to freeze that position. So police, fire.
Do we need to hear from DPW? We talked about the shade thing. Is there not much?
Position in solid waste in the transfer station. So you might want to hear from Blair if you want. But we've kind of had Blair here several times to talk about these. We've been.
You could send him an email.
I'll send him an email to her if it's.
Nice.
Yeah, sure.
On the DPW topic, is having a transfer station of some kind, is there a mandate to do that, or is that just a service that sounds like?
It's not a mandate, it's a service we offer. So we get some revenue.
We're still running at a loss.
It's trying to get it closer instead of.
They make some level of money. They used to make more. They make less now because the recycling markets have crashed over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think it would be difficult to shut the door on that completely. I would be an interesting discussion to have.
I mean,
in all seriousness, part of the.
I don't know. Discussion.
Everyone can get this.
Now that it's not revenue generating, I would be curious to just look at the comparison. Well, it's not positive.
It's not a positive.
It's never been positive, right?
It's got close.
Getting bigger. I would just be curious to see, the average taxpayer's contribution towards transfer station, not DPW's whole, but transfer station, and compare that to cost of private service. Especially.
Well, you're not gonna give them their money back.
I'm just saying.
You're gonna take away their service and use that money to pay some other budget hole.
But what's an override? Is it right? Is it cheaper for me to pay for?
I want to give you hard numbers here. For example, so this is not a big thing. So transfer station, the budget that we have for this year is $404,331. We're projecting revenue and what's in the budget for transfer station is $290,000.
That's 200 grand on a $50 million budget. You're talking less than USAID. Or Voice of America.
I mean, I think at this point, we need to look at all options.
That's why we put it on there. That's what we talked about. So
We brush with thrill, shine somebody.
Okay.
So 2 weeks, police and fire.
An interesting public discussion to have, Jonathan, I guess. It would really be an interesting public discussion to have with the town folk.
I mean, just, I mean, I know it's something that.
Grab a beer.
Just in the context of talking about overrides, like. These are the mandates, we're gonna have to work off and having conversations.
So $110,000, you better.
Aren't mandates, you know, we're gonna lose services somewhere. And whether it's, I think we're gonna have to prioritize where we want them to be lost. Do we want them to be lost in schools? Do we want them to be lost in fire?
I mean, my sister-in-law,
Transfer station, do we want to peanut butter it across all of these departments equally? You know, that 5,000 paper cut side, but we're gonna have conversations of if services are to be cut, where are we prioritizing?
Yep. You agree with that? My sister-in-law already makes fun of
A
me.
lot of recreation department things don't need that. This is scary.
No, pickleball.
From the sixth.
Right there.
Changes to the minutes from 2 weeks ago, March 5th. Justin, have you had a chance to take a look at it? Are you going to suspend?
They're all going.
And we talked about that earlier. If anyone else has any issues with the March 5th minutes?
I'm gonna roll that for lunch.
Okay. We get a motion on those.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from March 5th.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? No. And we don't have ones from last week. Is that accurate? Great. All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor?
I
Thank you, folks.